Hi, everyone. It's Kamon Reynolds. Hope you guys are doing good and looking forward to the weekend that is on the way. Of course, for beekeepers, that means just more time to play with our bees during this awesome time of the year. At least it is here in Tennessee, where we have just pollens coming in by the dozens and nectar starting to trickle in just a little bit. Awesome time of the year to be a beekeeper and try to stay ahead. We're going to talk swarm control today. We're going to take a lot of your questions. I also have a few things I'd like to get to, things that have been developing. I'd like to say thank you to all the people that contributed to the microscope and some of the parts and things. Laurel's working actually right now on getting a camera that can actually mount onto the microscope, and we are totally covered on everything. I like to say, especially a big thank you to Joel Roberts, who was a big part of making the microscope possible, and several others like Don Bearden and Brian Reese and Steve Chubb and others as well. And once we get it all rigged up, we're going to have a camera on it. So if we're doing any Nozema counts or anything else, you guys can actually see what we're looking at. You just don't have to hear me drone on about it. Be pun right there, be joke. So, hey, we got Massachusetts. Yeah, Captain America. This is one of the shirts that a friend of mine gave me. And if I had to be a superhero, it definitely would be Captain America. Swarming hard in North Carolina. We're getting swarm cells here, trying to stay ahead, pull bees back, but you always miss a couple. Oh yeah, Saint Germain. Fred Dunn is a genius when it comes to photography and all that stuff. I definitely may pick his brain. I actually might be doing a live chat with him before too long. We'll announce that when we've confirmed down a date, but we're in talks on that right now. Hey, GRS Trans, thank you so much for the donation and for coming on again to our YouTube live and ask away if you have any questions. Frozen Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you that we've had some cooler weather this year. We usually have 80-degree weather multiple times by now. Haven't had anything that I know of in the 80s. This time 10 years ago, we had several days in the 90s. And I remember getting married in April and it was 94 degrees Fahrenheit. And I did not have air conditioning in the black Jeep that we had. Whew, it was hot. And it wasn't just because Laurel was in there, it was sweaty hot in that black Jeep. But hey, you know what? I'll never forget that as long as I live. Yeah, I think that we're going to be seeing. I was talking to Bob Benny on the phone today. The blooms are a little bit behind. I don't see anything so far being wrong. Just some of the plants have had cooler weather. All the plants have, so they're just not blooming quite as early. So everyone, thanks for coming in and trickling in today. Hey, Chris Medeiros. Hope you're doing good. I guess I didn't even read that was you that said, "Hey, Captain America." Ah, see, I just don't even notice you anymore, Chris. I see you too often, I suppose. Massachusetts got them from all over the place. So let's get to a couple things I wanted to get to real quick before we dive into a lot of the questions. It's been crazy here lately. I haven't even shaved, so I'm usually kind of dressed up a little bit nicer for this, hair combed, all that kind of stuff, and it's just it is what it is today. We had another windstorm come through. There's been so many. I feel like we're Ian up there on those plains of Canada, and just getting these incredibly strong winds. My brother had at least 6 or 7 full size trees downed on his property. Thankfully, nothing hit the house, and we had a bunch of limbs up here blown down and bucket feeders blown off of the couple that had finished their buckets. And those hives got a little bit wet, but thankfully the weather was warm and the bees are okay. I'm sure they're a little bit stressed out over that cold shower, but most of them didn't lose their bucket feeders. And we really don't feed a lot with buckets, just a little bit here and there. But you've been cutting up. I plan on being the bees all day today, and I almost got into 0 hives just because of that. So that's just the way life is, though. So I'm hoping that they're not going to swarm this weekend. I'll work tomorrow on the bees and hopefully be able to get the rest of them done. Tomorrow also something that, well, I forgot. I won't. I forgot I have something else planned tomorrow. And I may actually show this on my other channel that I hardly ever post anything on my farming gardening channel. Is I'm going to be grafting some trees tomorrow, some apple trees, bench grafting. So I may video that and share that. I'm not a professional apple grafter, but I do my best. I prefer grafting queens. That's a lot more fun and definitely something I'm a lot better at. I wanted to say real quick that I'm going to be in Nashville speaking the 15th of May for their event. I believe it's free. It is a nice facility, and I'll be talking on 7 different types of ways to split bees, combinations, methods that we use, and methods other people employ, and some of the advantages and disadvantages of mated queens, letting them raise your own queens, queen cells, timings, all those kind of things. And obviously, there to talk and take questions. I'll also be in Dixon County, Tennessee on the 26th of April. So April 26th for Dixon County, and then Nashville 15th of May, and several others along the way. Honestly, I can't remember all of them. Those are the ones nearest and closest. I'm going to take a break for a little while. Cayman, is your wife going to let you grow a beard? No, she will not let that happen. This is about as far as it ever gets. And I asked Bob Benny a question that actually stumped him, and he said the technique may actually work. Well, that is fascinating. Bob is a smart guy. One thing I like about Bob is he'll tell you just when he doesn't know something, and I think that just shows you how wise he is. One of the recordings. That's another thing I needed to say is for those of you who don't already know, the Hive Life conference recordings are available. I think they turned out really good. The audio's clear, the visuals are clear, the PowerPoints are synced up really nice. And for those who came to the conference, you should have received an email for a $35 discount off of your Hive Life conference videos if you'd like to do that. So those are available through Vimeo. If you can't find it, um, they should have been sent to you from Kamon Reynolds at hivelifeconference.com, that email. But in those videos, Bob, I asked him a question. He's like, I don't think I really know the answer to that one. And I, of course, me being the jokester that I am, said, "Well, we're looking for new speakers for next year." and But I thought it was awesome that he was, willing to be up there on stage and not pretend like he knew something. He just, I don't really know the answer to that. So that's good. Yeah, and he responds to a lot of questions, and that's something I wish I had the time for. It is very, very well, it's impossible to respond to all the stuff that I get, and I'm sure that Bob, if he's not already at that point, will eventually get that way, and it's a it's a frustrating place to be because I would like to have more time to answer direct questions, but I just don't have it. All right, a lot of Tennesseans on tonight, and Alabama, and all kinds of stuff. Cayman, what do you think about people making the heated and insulated hives? I guess I did it years ago. It really works through Vero Farms. Did you see his? I think that's going to mean Vino Farms. And did you see his beehives? I have seen his beehives, and I think insulation is a good idea. I haven't looked a lot at his hives and like detail when there was actually bees in it. I'm sure that a hive that's kept free of mites and has good nutrition and a good queen will probably do wonderful in those boxes. But I think they would pretty wonderful in a lot of different things. And I think insulation is definitely underutilized in beekeeping, but I don't I don't think you have to get really I don't think you have to do a crazy unique hive in order to achieve that either. I think his hives are really cool. Honestly, he should see about bringing some to the Hive Life conference. That would be an interesting thing to see. But I do know that my horizontal hive is doing really good, and it's definitely more insulated. It's 2-inch boards versus 1-inch boards. Outside of that, it's got a little bit of a roof on it, which I think adds to a little bit of the heat retaining properties. But I think insulation should be used a lot more, even in the South. Hmm. Missing. I'm trying to go back up and get to some of the questions I skipped over. Hope you guys are having a good start to your weekend. Okay, so this person says my bees collected flour from bread. Why are they doing this, or what reason? And so this reminds me of an old YouTube video that a famous YouTuber by the name of Don the Fat Bee Man put out. And it was giving an example of how good this new formulation for his pollen sub was and how well it worked. And it was based upon the example that, look, the bees are working this pollen sub that I've created, and see, they're working it, so it must be good for the bees or they wouldn't work it. That's not the case. The reality of it was the recipe had less than 4% protein and was missing several amino acids, but it did get a lot of views on YouTube. Maybe I should have just said this instead. When bees have nothing else to forage, they are programmed. They are literal little alive computers essentially, and they're programmed to forage for the hives on the warm day. And anything that they feel like can come close to pollen, they will gather when they have no real pollen available. Bees will go after chicken feed. They'll go after bread flour. They'll go after um, factories that work with yeast or anything like that, brewer's yeast. They'll go after those things and bring them back to the hive. They'll go after corn flour. I've seen where people have had corn milled, and the bees will go after that. And they'll go, they get in all my neighbors' chicken feeders. And I have one neighbor who's well, it's not my neighbor. It's the place I have my bees, and about 50 hives over there, and then they have cows, just a handful, and they get a little bit weird. They're not from around here, and my bees are getting in their salt blocks for their cattle, and they're concerned about it. And what am I going to do? What am I going? Cayman, what are you going to do about this? Get your bees away from our salt blocks. First of all, how do they know they're my bees? They probably are, but I mean, it's not hurting anything. The cows aren't getting stung. No one's getting stung, but people are weird about bees sometimes. So basically, I made the short story long. When bees have nothing, their programming says we need to go out and find something useful to the colony. And sometimes what they actually bring back is not useful at all, but they're just following their programming. Okay. I tell you, they definitely love yeast and stuff like that as much as possible. Get that they like proteins, and hey, if it's a good bread flour, I love it too. And man, I love good bread. Homemade bread. My mama used to make some even before I was a beekeeper. She would make rolls, wheat rolls that were fresh, and they were sweetened only with honey. And then what you do to make them better is you open them up and they're hot, butter and more honey, and whoo, talk about putting on some weight. Dangerous, but so worth it. Yeah, pollen subs are not all created equal, and sometimes companies change them around periodically. Hey, Gus, good to see that you made it on. Watched a couple of your videos the other day. Came in, my man, help me build comb. I'm running out of deep comb and they ain't getting it done fast enough for me. All right. So that is the trick right there. And it's difficult this time of the year because this, of all times of the year, bees want to swarm. They want to build swarm cells. And so there is a fine line. When I was talking to Bob Benny earlier, I called him about conference related things, and we ended up shooting the bull about bees like beekeepers do. Yeah, Laurel just walked in the room and she's going, "It's mostly my fault." Okay, okay. So, but hey, Bob humored me, so it takes two to tango. Anyways, before I was so rudely interrupted, you just had a mental image of me and Bob tangoing. Hey, no more comments from the peanut gallery. Get out of here. Jeez. Women just know how to make you feel about that big, especially wives. And see how my train of thoughts derailed. Bob, we were talking about Bob. Man, oh well, like a fart in the wind. I'll come back around to that one later. Hey, Vanderpool Farms. Hope you guys are doing good up there with your operation. Your bees are very productive this year. We appreciate you liking our videos and being a part of the community we have. Oh, we were talking about swarming. Ah, there we go. So Bob was mentioning, he's like, Cayman, I'm kind of got a gamble going on right now. He's like, about a third of my colonies are at a point where if we get some really bad weather for a week or so, they'll go backwards because they just don't have a lot of food in the colonies. But also they're at a certain amount of strength and there possibly could be some flow going on because right now there is a little flow just enough to maintain, not really for them to sock away anything, but just enough to maintain. But he's like, I feel like if I feed them on top of that maintaining, it's going to kick them into producing swarm cells. And he's like, so I'm kind of hoping the weather just kind of keeps things going forward and I don't have to feed. Of course, he's like, if we get some weather coming in that's really bad for a week, I'll have to feed them and then deal with the consequences of the swarm cells. But I really liked him saying that for a couple reasons because that's something I'm going through right now. Bob and I, even though he's further south in Georgia, he's in the mountain regions of Georgia, so they really actually in some ways maybe have cooler weather than I do in northern Tennessee or very similar time periods of bloom. So to hear him say that, that he's mindful of those things that, I think sometimes in our minds, we think that guys like Bob have all these secret techniques that, us peons could never fathom. But that's what I like about Bob. Very upfront and honest. And now makes me feel a little bit better about what I was seeing yesterday in my bee yards as I was going through and seeing a handful of swarm cells. About a third of them were light, and I was like, do I feed? Do I not feed? There's a little bit of nectar shake right now. A lot of pollen coming in. So, but this is getting back to the fellow's question about what can I do to draw combs? The only way you're going to get your bees to draw comb is if they're wanting to grow and they have enough either nectar or sugar syrup coming into the hive that they're going to consume some of that and expand that out. And if you're wanting to not split up the bees, then you're going to have to watch swarming this time of the year, but you can feed them and they will draw combs out. What I would do is stick a frame of foundation next to some larvae and some uncapped larvae and feed them a little bit and get that started. And if they're big enough, they can handle having a box on top. You definitely don't want to give them too much space early in the season. Have a cold snap. I don't know where you're located. Here in Tennessee, we're out of the woods really pretty much on weather like that. But up north, you got to watch it. But I have learned over the years that yes, you can get more combs drawn feeding early in the season, but you'll also get more swarming with it. Now, one of the ways that I like to draw combs that doesn't really come with the swarming so much is after the honey flow. I know you need yours now, but it's going to be a little tedious. So watch the swarming if you feed them and try to draw some supers. If you wait till after the honey flow and you get these colonies and they're strong, what I like to do is reduce them down. And so there's too many bees for the boxes they have, and then put foundation on them and pull up a frame of larvae up into that foundation and feed them thin syrup, thin syrup. It can be 3/4 of a pound of sugar to a pound of water or 1 to 1, whatever you want to do. But you got to feed them a good bit to draw that out. Usually I'm doing that in late June. Still big bee populations. Use those old bees that are left over from the honey flow to try to draw out some of those supers and get some a little bit more work out of them. And you never can have too many good combs. I actually have too many combs this year, but it's still a good problem to have. Yeah, that's the way that's where we're at right now, Gus. I mean, the bees are going full throttle, and it feels like one good few days of nectar flow away from swarm cells all over the place, and that's why I'm pulling the bees back. It's a little tedious. That's right, Vanderpool Farms. You're out in Oregon too. I forgot Bob and you were both out in Oregon. I know about 3 different beekeepers from Oregon, and all of them seem to be all right guys. So, one of the guys that helps us put on our conference is what I call our Oregon donor, and he really hates it when I say that. But he's probably not watching. He's not a beekeeper. But yeah, he came from Oregon. I convinced him to move here to Tennessee, And now I've got him involved with all this bee stuff, and he wonders what in the world happened to his life. Hey, Lindsay Farms, going good. Yep. Yes, you do, Todd. We have a microscope, and Laurel did commit to making a video if she got a microscope. She really regrets that now. Um, she'll be she's one of those girls though. She'll be a little embarrassed to do it, but there's people that get nervous and then they fold under the pressure, and there's people that get nervous and still do awesome. That's my wife. What's your favorite interior hive feeder? So I like frame feeders. There's all kinds of different models out there. You got the Sarah cells that sit on top. There's other round feeders you can put on top of the frames, but I like frame feeders. They've worked really good for me. The only time I get really major drowning with a frame feeder is if the bees are sick, or if there's a bunch of bees down into the feeder and pour a bunch of cold syrup on them or something like that, where it kind of messes their body temperature up and they drown in there. But I feed with frame feeders all the time. I tried out bucket feeders this last year, and I think in some applications bucket feeders have some advantages, but overall, frame feeder is my favorite for sure. I love a 1.5 gallon frame feeder. You can get them from Mother Lode or from Man Lake. Man Lake's 1.5 gallons, pretty good. And there's some top feeders out there. The biggest reason I don't like top feeders that fit on top of the hive is hundreds of hives, and having to pick that off every time is a real big pain in the rear end. And buckets are similar to that. The frame feeders, since they're unlike the buckets, aren't getting all that hit by the sun and breaking down because of the UV. Where buckets can lose seal over time and the sun wears out the buckets and they get blown around. Raccoons knock them off, drink the syrup out of them, all that kind of stuff. And I had one raccoon chew through the lid of a bucket. Something chewed through the lid of that bucket. I mean, it was tore up. I don't get those problems with frame feeders. And I have frame feeders that are 10 years old and still look like they have years in them. So I like that about the frame feeders. If you're concerned about drowning, you can take some eight number 8 hardware cloth and kind of crinkle it up and weave it down in there, and the healthy bees can crawl out of a frame feeder without any help. Though a lot of it depends on temperature of the syrup. If there's a bunch of bees down there, and don't use a frame feeder as you're installing a colony that's not locked in. Like if you plug in a nuke and put a frame feeder, usually pretty darn good. If you throw a package in with a full frame feeder, a lot of times they run around, especially if you shake the package, and as they're running around, a lot of them get down there and they push each other down into the syrup. Bees that have a good queen and are laying good brood behave totally differently. All right, back to questions. Yeah. So Hansberry honeybees was like it's about drawing Coleman's forming. Yeah. Sorry, I I'm not at 100% today. It's been a day, but I just felt like I needed to come on here and communicate with you guys. 'Cause I had several things I wanted to talk about. We have a lot of exciting things going on. One of the things I wanted to ask you all is a couple favors. First of all, our conference is focused primarily on the sideliner, serious hobby beekeeper and small professional. We are not a Our conference is not centered around commercial beekeeping. And that's primarily what all of us fall into the category of. However, I would like to have a small percentage as we grow pollination almond information. And I know that there are men and women out there who have good information and are good beekeepers at that level. I want to have one speaker this year, and probably from here on out, that can talk about that, because we do have guys like Bruce Jean has a great YouTube channel. Jose's got a good YouTube, and there's other guys that are on here and do things on YouTube as well. And Bob used to as well, that do almond pollination. So I want to have that information available at our conference. I do believe that from top to bottom, the industry must work together, commercial all the way down with hobbyists. It's not like the hobbyists have a lot of information to offer to commercial guys, but at the same time, and it's not like hobbyists are going to always want to sit down and listen to how almond pollination is done. But at our conference, I want to have that available to everybody. But if you're wanting hobby information, we have it. If we have want to learn how to be a commercial guy, we have it. So if you know somebody who does that kind of commercial beekeeping, has a wonderful personality, and is a good educator, I'm looking to get somebody to speak at our future conferences that does the pollination game. It doesn't have to be almonds, but it could be apples, whatever. And obviously, we have very talented people coming this year with Bob Benny coming back again, Chris Warner, who does commercial queen rearing and also has done pollination and other things in the past and sells bees. Paul Kelly and Ian Stepler. We have very high level speakers, but we're going to try to diversify it out quite a bit this year so we have something for everybody. And that's what'll be nice about having the two rooms. Also wanted to say that I've had interest expressed from Cowan Manufacturing to come to our conference, and which is exciting because they produce some of the finest extraction equipment in the industry. However, they're still debating between us and the ABF. Obviously, we don't have as much of a commercial beekeeping presence, which is their target audience. They are looking into possibly getting back into building stuff for beekeepers like you and me, smaller stuff. So, and very high quality USA made things. So, if you know of somebody who wants a silver queen uncapper, or if you want one at our conference, let me know. We probably can work out a deal and maybe save you some money on it. And Cowan, if Cowan can sell a product or two at our conference, that'll kind of be the selling point. If you know a guy who's in the Sevierville, Tennessee region that wants one, we can hook them up. I would love to see a full line like Ian's or Bob's setup, or I've got a smaller version setup of the Cowan system, a full line at our conference. That would be pretty sweet. I'll just be standing over there the entire time. I love that much stainless steel. Okay, back to it. Let's get to some questions. Kamon, how many hives do you have now? We have a little under 300. And this is something I actually came on tonight as well to mention to you all. I think some of you who have followed me a lot have seen this coming, and I've talked about it a little bit, but it's reached the point. Unless I go the route of employees, we have got to cut back. The conference is literally going to take probably 3 or 4 months of my life this year. It's amazing how much time it takes, but we are going to. Those of you who came this last year, I'm going to do my best to blow your socks off, and you'll see the growth. And so we're putting a lot of work into it. Also, the YouTube channel, I really could be putting a lot more work into it with interviews, education. I've got a list almost as long as I am of ideas to do videos on, and some of them are 2 years old, just haven't got around to it. It's not always videos that I do, but interviews with people in the country, outside of the country, that I think would be wonderful for all of us to get to see. So I'm going to be shrinking our bee operation likely down to 150 colonies. We also have the experimental yard, which I did not film near as much last year, and I still have footage. I have footage of that. I have footage of our extraction system. I have footage of swarm boxes and videos and videos and videos that I have still to upload that I haven't. I have a lot of videos that I'm behind on. So I've come to realize that I just can't do everything that I like to do. And that's my biggest problem is I enjoy all this stuff. And so it's hard sometimes for me to tell people no and also to tell myself no. But for my wife's sanity, my sanity, and for also everyone else's benefit, I'm going to have to learn how to control those impulses. We're going to drop the bee operation down to around 150 colonies, and we are going to focus heavily on the experimental yard this year. I'm very thankful I have Richard Brickner and several of the people that helped us put the conference on to volunteer this year to help me do the experiments. We now have EPA exemption to legally test oxalic acid pads, similar to Randy Oliver. And I've been talking to him on the phone and through email. We're going to try to run it very well. Our goal is not to. I'd love it if it was a silver bullet, but I don't think that it is. But I think it could be a weapon in that we have in the toolbox to use, a tool in the toolbox. And my goal is to hopefully see it to where it will hold the mites. It'll like hold the line. So if we have like a 1% infestation, we can put that on and it'll hold the line for a little time until maybe we want to put on another type of treatment. For me, my thoughts are my biggest mite problems are always July and August and early September. And I found good success with treating in June with thymol or previously Apivar, and then following up with some other treatment after some washes in August. And that works really good. But I'm still finding a certain percentage of outlier colonies that either the treatment didn't get, or maybe they've robbed out a dead out swarm that had a lot of mites in it, or whatever it is. And I would love to have a clean product because we don't have honey supers on in July and August. I would love it if it was legal for a product, either this one or another, where we could put it on there. It's very clean for the colony and could be treating those mites and keeping that line. We put them in at 1% average, when we get back 1% average, and I can treat with thymol, put these pads in, and just keep the mites low all throughout the season. When I focus heavily on the mites, my bees always look so much better going into winter and coming out of winter. So, hey, I like that H Hawk. Sting that like button. I do like that terminology. So, 150 hives is the I can do a lot with 150 hives. The goal is to have a 100 production colonies run at a very high level and to produce a little over 10,000 pounds of honey a year, which is not as much as we've been producing, but um, we just we just can't do everything. I'm still sitting on some barrels of honey, but that's okay. W- Very thankful for where we're at. And the experimental yard is important because ultimately I feel like that'll be more helpful than me producing another 10, 20,000 pounds of honey, is if we can help, and maybe we just help guys like Randy or some university be able to figure some things out for us faster. But I'm hoping that the oxalic acid can not be a cure all, but something that will help out quite a bit. So I just got a message from Thorn Manufacturing saying that he's coming from Cowan. They better look out. Big words there, Jed. But at the same time, I totally respect that because there's been a lot of people tell me I can't do things, and I have done some of those things. Anyways, let's see. Let me get back to some questions. Um, Okay, so here's a comment right here that I would like to talk about because it kind of goes into what I was just saying. So this guy Joshua says, "I'm planning to come to next year's conference. I'm hoping my son gets one of the sponsorships," and that's exactly something I've got to get to work on. I've got to make that available. My goal is by June to have everything available to you all, June 1st, to where people can buy tickets, see what the costs are, see where the savings are, plan out hotels, where are the deals with the Dolly Part. We're working with the Dolly Part Association to try to drum up some deals for other events outside, shows and things. And not everybody likes that stuff, but if you like it, we want it to be at a discount rate because we feel like we can do that, especially in January when they're slow, and get discounts on hotels. So there's a lot of, that's where a lot of my time now is going. I spend probably 15 to 20 hours a week on the phone, which is interesting. Not used to that, but God did give me a set of lungs. So it's not like I can't run my mouth that long. Laurel's like, "Amen, preach it." Oh goodness. So, but yes, I need to get that available, and we have over $7,000 so far onto the kids sponsorships, and I have someone who's donating another 2,000, so that'll put us up at 9,000, and 100% of that is going to hotel, kid, and guardian sponsorship. So I'm hoping that we'll at least have 20 young men and women from college age down sponsored. And I'll want to verify those young men and women and look forward to meeting them. And I want to have the time at the conference too to be able to make sure they get plenty of attention. And I'm planning on having a specific class just for them, focused around running a small sideline or even professional business in some of the things that it took Bob or myself or others to get off the ground, and just you know, important information to being sustainable in your apiary and turning a profit, whether it's a small scale or a big scale. So, and I definitely want that. Those the kid next generation is so important. And I've said this before. The reason I want kids involved is because they'll have fresh ideas. Hopefully, if they stick around, and they'll create products that will make my life easier. So that's what they're there for, is to make it easier. Yeah, I was so busy at the conference. I didn't have time to talk to anybody because I was basically running a lot of it myself, and between myself and Laurel and basically a couple, friends of ours, that was about our staff, and that's changing a good bit this year. But we just didn't know a lot of stuff, and so this next year, according to Laurel, my job is to shake hands and to network. It's gonna be so hard. I don't know how I'll live with that job, but I'll do my best. Ian's drinking wine right now. It wouldn't surprise me, but Canadians, any excuse. I mean, it snows, so like grab an eggnog. It frosts late in the year. Grab a wine. They just. I guess that's what you do when you have long winters. Is you just go for the mead. Yeah, I really hate it for the guy. I hope his bees aren't as bad as what they look. Ian looks like he's having it rough right now, and of all the people, he works really hard on his bees, and so as another beekeeper who's had losses, it's hard to see. Hmm. All right, questions, questions, questions. I don't know if Ian will ever dig out of all the snow he's in. Yeah, he's under a lot of snow. So a lot of people talking about Ian and the snow. Hmm. So back to the questions. Actually, not getting a ton of questions. At least I haven't seen it. If you had some earlier that were a while back, go ahead and repost them. We'll get to those questions. I want to talk here in just a second about swarming and swarm control, and would love to have your questions on that. And I think there's just a few things that I would like to get to, and then we're just going to go straight on to questions, and just conversation. The conference date is January 6th and 7th. So if you're interested in that, it will be on the 6th and 7th in Sevierville, Tennessee. And I wanted to, I got this book, and I've got a lot of things over the years. This is probably one of the more eccentric books that I've gotten in a while. And this one is Vocabulary Essentials. Um, this is Larry Connor's son, Andrew. And I was really interested, because as we know, there's like three ways to say the same thing in beekeeping. And it's a huge book. There's over 200 pages about bee vernacular, which I thought it would be kind of boring stuff. This is a hive tool. This is this. This is that. But I'm actually really impressed by the pictures and the detail on, if you're wanting information on how the bees visibly see, on what they can see, what they can't see, the type of dances they do, the color spectrum. This over here is talking about the how electrically, when bees leave the hive, they're not electrically charged, but as they pass through the air and fly, they develop a positive charge on their body. As they approach a flower, they transfer a positive charge to it. And after they leave, the charge remains nearly for 2 minutes. This informs other bees or themselves as they approach that flower that it has just been visited, and it is and that way they're more efficient in gathering. And for a colony, let's say a hive of bees, and I've heard about this before, but I thought this was kind of a basic book as far as, this is a box, all that basic stuff. But I find that really cool. I've always thought that was fascinating when I first learned that years ago, is that if bees are very specific, so if they're focused on working this crop of, let's say, black locust blossoms or clover blossoms, those clover blossoms are leaving that energy there and basically helping the other bees in their colony be more efficient as they're foraging that crop. And it's just insane how intricate the whole thing is. And the flower, possesses a negative charge on sunny days, and this signal is read by bees. And of course, that static, that charge being different, that's why the pollens go onto the bees, because of that charge. So it just makes so much sense. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So I didn't get paid or anything to plug this book, but anyone who knows me, Gus knows me. Gus and I were bad about drooling over the bee books at the event. But this was a really interesting one called Beecabulary Essentials, and I thought this would be a good book for like bee clubs. I know big bee clubs that rent books out for to or lend books out to their beekeepers. I really think that's a pretty fun book. Um, okay, yeah, Jose is an awesome guy. I talked to him on the phone the other day too. How do you know if your bees have Nozema? If Ian's in the house or someone with more experience, I have actually never looked for Nozema in my bees. That's why I'm excited about this microscope we now have, and Laurel's really excited about it too for a lot of reasons. But I'm going to be testing my bees for Nozema. That's not something we really talk about a lot here in Tennessee. I don't think is near as a big of an issue as it is up north, but that's just what we're told. Could it still be an issue some years? Maybe it is, and we just don't realize it, and we chalk it up to Varroa or something else. Came when I had an idea of a bunch of honeybees inside a greenhouse with the honeybees generating the heat to keep the greenhouse warm. I think obviously they would contribute to some heat to the greenhouse. My concern would be the greenhouse also warming up the hive, where, as you know as well as I do, that for an example, it could be 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but on a good sunny day, it might be 85 inside that greenhouse. And so the bees inside that hive are going, man, it's warm outside. And they start flying around. And even it'd be even worse on in colder days, like if it was actually 30 degrees or 25 degrees outside, but it was sunny and it was 65 in that greenhouse or whatever, it might cause those bees to fly and then get outside the hive and lose their body temperature and die out in either snow or just on some cold ground. So I think that probably wouldn't work. I actually thought of that myself a while back and wondered if I could make that better for the bees. But the reality of it is, I think that as far as I can understand it, it might actually cause more problems than it fixes. Okay. Getting into some questions. Question: I keep my supers in my garage over the winter every year. This week I added 4 supers to 2 strong colonies and I killed them. I have not used anything to treat with. So, y- hmm. So I'm kind of confused, Christian. It, you killed them as far as adding too many supers and they froze out, or they died already when you were putting the supers on? If you could add a little clarification to that, I'll definitely get to that question. All right, ECP, if a swarm cell is drawn out but still uncapped, can you still stop the swarming tendency of the hive? If so, best ways to stop the swarming activity when they're at this stage. All right, great question. This is a position where you actually have some more wiggle room. When I see capped queen cells, that colony is going to swarm. I've tried, and maybe they won't every time, but the percentages are really darn high. And I typically find if they have capped cells, and I try to just pull the bees back and try to do something, they still swarm on me as long as that old queen's still in there. So, but if he's talking about before they're in that position and they haven't capped the cells yet, what I would do is go into that colony and I'm going to have to shake every frame, and whether it's at the bottoms or the top or the middle of the frame, make sure I have every queen cell and crush it. And then I'm going to pull a frame or two of brood, pull a frame of capped brood, pull, and if they have a lot of frames of food, they're heavy on the food side, pull some of that too. If you have to stick it in the freezer, if you have some extra drawn combs, that's where it's fortunate to have drawn combs. You plug in if they have excess food, pull a food frame or two, take them out, freeze them, or give them even better to a colony that could use the boost. Give them that frame of brood too. Beef up a colony that's a little bit behind. You basically want to make a small split because you want to keep the colony strong for honey production, but you are going to pull that hive back. You're going to open up that brood nest and add combs, but you're also going to come back. They will cap cells within about 6 days. So you need to come back in less than a week. Don't give them enough time to cap some more cells because that tendency is still there. And until that tendency of swarming has wore off, it's all they can almost think about. So you need to open up that brood nest, keep that queen laying, and um, give them, if they're bringing in nectar, of course, add a super on top, and you'll come back and you'll probably have to cut cells again. There's other ways to take care of this. I know one of my favorite books as far as classics is Honey in the Comb by Eugene Killian, and they talk about where they made comb honey, and they would get the colonies really strong, condense them down, get the colonies would almost want to swarm. They'd go in there and cut cells, and they'd pull the old queen out, come back in one more time, cut cells, and like drop a new queen in there. And that new queen, from a cage, I made a queen. Since there was a little bit of a break there, and also she was a young queen. Young queens typically, um, their strong pheromone presence and really helps the colony not want to swarm as well. Older queens are more likely to swarm on you. And so that was one of the ways they dealt with it. And now having a young queen in this monstrously powerful colony, they were some of the, and still are some of the most renowned comb honey producers in the world. Of course, their business is no longer around, but man, if I wish, I'd been able to meet one of them and sit down and have a conversation. I know, I believe the Eugene is still alive, if I'm not mistaken, but I think he's 90 odd. Or thereabouts. And I hope he's doing well. But I really love their book, Honey in the Comb. Wonderful read. Even if you're not doing comb honey, I still love that book. So that's what I would do. I'm going to pull them back. I'm going to take some brood from them. I'm going to open up that brood nest. And then I'm going to come back, and if I'm going to cut those cells out, I would expect them to draw cells. They're going to do it the next time. That tendency is still there, and then come back again a third time if you have to. And there are people out there that say if you get into your bees once a week, you're going to stress them out and kill them. They obviously haven't ever been to my bees. Now I don't like getting into them that often, but when you're doing honey production and you're trying to run powerful colonies for the biggest yields, and in areas like mine, my honey flow is going to be about a month and a half. That's we produce like 90% or more of our honey that we get to keep, basically almost 100% in a month and a half window. And if we have a average year in a powerful colony, we can average over 100 pounds a year. And I have beekeepers in this region who don't get near to that. And I used to never get near to that either. But didn't have as much comb back then. We didn't have as many strong colonies, and we didn't know how to keep them from swarming. So as that video I just released on the horizontal hive gives a good indication of what we do. um, ECP, that colony was not making swarm cells yet, but I promise you they were within a week of doing it. And just experience, I knew that they were going to need pulled back. I've pulled them back twice already. And there's, of course, variables throughout your bee yard, because you'll go into a bee yard and you know what I'm talking about. You'll have some colonies that just kill it. And I mean, they just make bees like crazy. And then there's some that are a little bit behind. So those big ones, you might have to pull back twice, little bits, frame a brood or two. And then that other one you might pull back once. And then there's some colonies that don't, they need help. Now, as far as, I want to kind of finish with this, as far as who do we give that brood to? Who do we give those resources as we pull back our big colonies and keep them from swarming, and give that brood to? Who do we equalize that resources to? We don't give it to undeserving colonies. If the colony has spotty brood patterns, if there's a little bit of EFB, if there's something iffy, if that's maybe our only other option, yeah, I guess that's what we do. But what we look for is colonies that have a queen with a great brood pattern. They're small. Let's say it's like right now we want our colonies, double deep strength, or just a little bit behind that right now. We're not quite there to the honey flow. But we have colonies that have really great brood patterns, but they're only occupying about 8 frames. So that would be an ideal colony to give it to. They're a little bit behind the game. Give it to them, add a super and keep them in space and get them in a position between one or two equalizations and position for a honey crop as well. So, but I don't give good clean brood and good resources to a sickly colony. It's just a waste in my opinion. Bee bed. Have you heard of Dr. Leo's bee bed? Seems pretty cool. I have not heard of that. Must be something new he's working on, or maybe it's something old. I haven't seen it. Yeah, the bee kill from the supers, Christian. I haven't seen anything yet. Maybe it jumped and I didn't see your return comment. As the supers might have gotten contaminated with something. Only I can imagine my boat battery is close with. This might be the problem to kill all the bees. Two deeps full on each colony on the ground. Holy smokes! I and unless you had like battery leakage all over the combs, I just find that hard to believe that it's something in storage. That sounds like if you're actually having two deep bees full on each colony and dead on the ground in clusters, that sounds like some type of pesticide kill or something like that. They spray mosquitoes in your area, um, maybe a farmer with a pesticide. I don't know. I mean, it's not super common. It's not near as common as a lot of beekeepers think, but it does happen. And unless you stored it with some type of chemical, or there's leakage from the battery, I just don't see what you could have done to cause that. Keep me posted on that, Christian, as you look into that a little bit more. And that's really interesting. Cayman Reynolds, when wax dipping boxes that have not been yet assembled with a wood swell making it hard to put them together. One thing that is an issue, like say you get boxes from I almost said almonds, boxes from the Amish, or you make boxes yourself that are not kiln dried, the boxes will shrink due to cooking in that wax. And if the joints are made to go good together prior to wax dipping, they may not go together near as good with the wax dipping. I have always wax dipped with the boxes assembled because I know when I put staples or screws or anything into those boxes, I'm making vulnerable areas for it because a wax dip does not penetrate the boxes very much. I don't know how deep it goes into the boxes, but we're talking like probably paper thin paper. I don't know how thick it is, but you can cut into the wood and you'll see that it doesn't go that deep into it. It doesn't really have to. If it's a perfect coat and it covers everything like it does, then you're good. But I don't know. I do know of a couple beekeepers who wax dip unassembled, but I'm pretty sure they're all using kiln drying stuff. That's something you'll have to figure out and let me know nuts and bolts if you do try that. If you don't mind, I would be interested in knowing how that works for you. And so Laurel's talking with someone right now, and I wanted to say again that the Hive Life videos are available for those who came to the conference. There's a $35 um, discount for coming, and we wish we could have kept the prices even lower than that. But as they are right now, I'm not even sure we're going to break even, which I think we'll still continue to do them anyways, just because I think it's a nice thing to have. But we'll see how that works throughout the year for us, and I think we'll continue to do it. But we're still deciding if we want to do that again next year. It was quite a bit of work, and I apologize how long it took to get that done. But that's part of the problems with a lot of what we're doing right now is I'm not a tech guy. I know I'm on YouTube right now, but I don't understand Vimeo and all the ins and outs of coupon discounts and all those things. I need to hire some nerd. Hey, Chris, are you still on here? Sorry, I couldn't help but pick on you. You're an Ohio State fan. I mean, come on. You should be used to it. Yeah, I was talking so a lot of cutouts. I was talking to Randy McCaffrey a few days ago, and he said he did 4 cutouts so far this week. 4 cutouts. Whew, that's a lot of work, especially down there in Mississippi where it's hot, hot, hot. Hey, Kim, Cayman, do you have any? I pronounce my name wrong now. Jeez. Hey, Cayman, any tips for cutouts? No, I'll never have tips for cutouts. I'm one of those beekeepers that hates doing cutouts. Some guys love it and they're really good at it. There's several guys on YouTube, Randy McCaffrey's got his videos, JP the Bee Man, Jeff Horshoff I think does some as well. And I've never done a video of a cutout as far as in a house. I have done those a few times in the past, but um, we really focus on just keeping our bees healthy and being able to split our bees. And honestly, in the time frame that we can split, we can do a cutout. I could split colonies, raise my own queens, or just not pull my hair out. I do think that needs to be people doing that. It's one of those things where if you know what you're doing, and I think you have the right equipment, it can go pretty well. I think. But there's also insurance. If it's a house, there's insurance involved. I really don't know a lot about that realm of beekeeping. I find it really fascinating, have a lot of respect for the people that do it, but you're not going to see me, as far as I know, doing anything like that unless Laurel says I have to. Hmm. Yeah, the Buckeye fan is still here listening. The short man speak. Yeah, that's right. Yappy the Bee Man does cutouts, right? There's several people that do some of those cutouts. I always say Randy McCaffrey though. He does a lot of cutouts, but I don't know if he's more of a cutout man or a cut up man. I think he's more of a cut up than a cutout. How long can you bank mated queens? Ooh, well, it depends on how you bank them. And there are some people that literally will bank them for 4 or more weeks. And I've never done anything that extensive. It's definitely been proven that the longer that you bank them, the more apt you are to lose some in banking, but also that they won't introduce quite as well. I've never banked for a long period. The longest I've ever banked is 2 weeks, and it worked pretty well for me. But the colonies that I were giving those banked queens to were splits that I made where they were all young bees. It was in the spring time of the year. Had I there's Queens are not accepted quite as easily during periods of robbing or dearth in summer as they are in spring. Most everything's better in spring except swarm prevention. But that's what I was talking to Bob about. Usually, the more swarming issues we have, the better the honey flow is. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Praying for good honey flows. But as far as banking queens go, I have kept them like the JZ BZ plastic cages. They were my queens, and I caught them, put them in, and I kept them for 2 weeks in one of those shipping boxes that they have, and they have the screens on them. And I shook in. I think a lot of it is excess amount of nurse bees, and I shook in new bees from 1 week to the next. So I shook in bees twice and released the old bees. You got to keep you got to keep those young bees in there. Old bees don't attend to the queens quite as good. They just don't. I don't think they can, anyways. As far as young bees have more resources in their body, so as they get older, they're just not as capable of attending them. But I definitely, the less you can bank them, the better. Bob Benny has given a really good talk on banking queens, allowing queens to lay. It's very educational as far as how much that affects super seizure rates. And that's part of the problems with a lot of the early queens from some of the commercial operations is these queens are banked. They're not allowed to lay very long, and they have multiple factors going against them. And that's why sometimes those earliest queens that you buy have pretty high supersedure rates. It really depends on who you get your queens from, and it makes a world of difference. That's why I choose to raise my queens because I get what I want, and ultimately they're better. Cayman, do you feed the queens when banking them? Absolutely. So we also are going to leave a sponge in there. Now, if you have them like banked inside a queenless hive, I'm really not super experienced into that, so I won't talk about that. But basically, when I bank mine, it's for under 2 weeks. Most of the time, it's under 1 week. And I will just shake a bunch of nurse bees. And all you have to do to get a bunch of nurse bees is you can take yourself a box, like a Jester Nuke box, or just even a cardboard box, and you make sure you don't get your queen from that colony, and you find frames of either bee bread or larvae, because that's where most of your nurse bees hang out. They're either feeding the larvae because larvae take a lot of individual feeding, or they're going over to the bee bread to get resources to create jelly, because they'll make, of course, royal jelly for queens, and then they'll make worker jelly specific for workers as they develop to a certain age. So they got to go over there and get those fats and proteins. So that's where we're going for our nurse bee population. Now we're going to shake those into the box, and then we're going to have our smoker handy, and we're going to give them a puff or two of smoke, and all the forager bees are going to fly back to the original colony. So all the bees that are crawling around in the box, they haven't flown yet. Those are your nurse bees, and so those are the ones that we want to bank our queens with, and they'll do a really good job. Now, I feel like, me personally, for every queen that you have in there, I want enough to cover that queen cage about 3 or 4 times over. It's probably a little excessive, but these are queens we're talking about here, and I don't want them to want for lack of attention. And so we will put queen candy in there. We make our own queen candy. It is 2 pounds of powdered sugar to 1 cup of honey, I believe. Now we only use our honey. So if you don't have honey of yours to use, you can get some Pro Sweet from Man Lake or something like that. And you got to get the syrup warm and mix it together. And we will put some of that queen candy in there, or you can cut a hole in the top, and I fed 1-to-1 syrup to them as well. If the bees aren't nutritionally well taken care of, then the queens are not getting well taken care of. Also, I don't put attendants in my cages. My queens are in the cages just themselves. So it'll be a queen candy in the cages, and then there'll be bees on the outside. That's the way I prefer to do it. I don't like stuffing a bunch of bees in the cage with the queen. And I think that the queens are better taken care of in banking if it's just the queen. That's my opinion. So we're going to give, and then we must give them a sponge. We're going to give them a sponge that we're going to make sure that it's damp, because those bees need water as well to help dilute that candy down. And also, just bees need water. um, Keep them cool. Definitely don't let them get hot or get too cold. So that's how I bank queens, but ultimately I try to avoid it as much as possible. It's just like a good bag of Lay's chips. Ooh, I wonder if this should I be getting paid for this ad right here? I know I love chips. Good. Now I don't like the flavored chips. I'm one of those guys. Yes, vanilla ice cream, maybe chocolate if we're feeling a little bit frisky, and then I will regular potato chips. They're better when they're fresh. Same way with the queens. Get them in the colonies as soon as you can. Okay, Cayman, did you feed? Okay, yeah, I already got to that, Don. Yeah, good question, Don. Though I'm glad you brought that up, or I wouldn't have got to it. So Yasmin says that she has a colony that with tons of dead bees on the bottom of the hive, a cluster that didn't stick together. Maybe they got alienated from the food, separated from the food, and they weren't able to keep warm. Is it possible that maybe you could do a autopsy, like Yasmin, do a wash on it, an alcohol wash, and see if there was some varroa in there amongst the bees that may have been chipping away at the cluster and affecting their ability to be able to move um, really good. I don't know. A lot of times when I see a big cluster of bees at the bottom of the hive, sometimes it's a lot of times I think starvation, especially if there's heads down in the cell. But if you're not seeing a lot of heads down in the cell and there's plenty of food, then I'm going to kind of look at Varroa and see if they disrupted the cluster. Of course, you're in Sweden, Yasmin, which, as you know, is a lot different from Tennessee. I don't have winters that your winters are like this big, and mine are like, do we even have a winter? That's kind of our winters here. So, if you have some pictures of it, Yasmin, send them to me, and I'll take a shot at seeing if I can figure it out. But it might be a little tricky. Might be some European thing they got going on over there. Cayman, would a location near a road, light traffic county road be a good place for a swarm trap? I read somewhere that bees use these open areas to travel. Thoughts? Yes, bees do, in my experience with swarm trapping, and also what I've read as well, they don't like going deep into the woods. They want the edge of a tree line. They don't want to be in a big thicket. It's a pain to get in and out of those areas. And so the edge of a highway or something like that, count a country road, that's where mine are. I actually managed to get about, I think, 10 put up this year. I have a really nice video, I feel like, on it with I think, some really good tips that I've never talked about before. And that was supposed to go up about a month ago. So maybe I'll get that up eventually. But yeah, that would be a good location. That's where I look for mine is one, I want to find an area with a lot of good plants for a nectar flow because the stronger the flows are, usually the better the bees do. Habitat is important. And areas like that on the edge of a road or something like that are usually good. Just watch out for the rednecks shooting holes in them. You should do a conference in Indianapolis. Well, I think they already have a conference up there, the Indiana Bee School or something like that. I thought that was in Indianapolis. But I actually have some people, some of these are large companies trying to convince me to do another type of conference for commercial beekeepers. And that is really out of my realm right now. The ABF and the honey producers can keep that genre. It's really, I think, quite a bit different than what we go for. I think we'll continue to build and we'll look at our options. And it's not out of our it's not a complete no that we're never going to move the conference. Right now, we've got a lot of things to learn, and we have learned a lot. But adding on to that, moving long distances and multiple conferences is it's biting off more than we can chew. But in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw our conference possibly move. I don't know where. We have to think of it logistically from what makes sense for us. And ours is run different. We don't hire people like a lot of the other conferences do to put on their events. It's all done ourselves. And honestly, I mean, to be honest, I grew up in Indiana. I've been to Indianapolis many times, but when I think of places I want to go for a conference, Indianapolis is not really what I'm thinking of in January. We already had some snow at our conference in Tennessee, which was surprising. When I'm thinking of conferences, locations in January, I'm thinking Florida. If Laura will let me do one down there. But we also have to think, one of the things that we're focused on even more this year is diversity in products and diversity in the best deals in the country. And if we stick it all the way down in the southern tip of Florida, how many people are going to be able to drive? So that's another issue we have to think of. Also, it's got to be close to a major airport. That's where Indianapolis would be useful. So we got a lot of things to think of, and we're actually finding that it's quite tedious because many of these conferences, especially in bigger cities, don't have good parking. Then you have to pay for parking, and you have to pay more for hotels in certain locations. So we really are trying to go the extra mile to keep this as affordable as possible. But nothing really is off the table. If anything was off the table, it's probably sticking it in the communist state of California. Sorry, California people. I don't mean to pick on you. I got a lot of friends in California. And if we found a good opportunity, we would consider maybe having a second one in California, but that's a long ways off. I just like to pick on California. It's kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the United States. Either that or Kentucky. Okay, so back to some questions here. I scroll back up because it's dropped down on me quite a bit. And I got to get something. I'm like cheating today. You'll rarely ever see me with a soda, but I have one today, caffeine free, and that is needed. Woo. Doesn't work as good as honey on the energy side of things, but it will get the job done. Frames of uncapped honey that have mold or mildew over, give to the bees to clean up or junk wax. As long as it's just a little bit of mold or mildew over them, bees will handle it just fine. It's always best to try to keep your combs from getting that kind of stuff on them. But if it's just a little bit of mold and it's nothing too crazy that's actually compromised the structural integrity of the cells and the cell walls, then yeah, the bees will clean that up and reuse that. It happens. And honestly, that's what happens a lot in nature. A lot of swarms die out in trees and things. Colonies die out, and then a new colony will swarm into them as a natural swarm trap, and boom, use it. And it works really good for them because it's less resources they'll have to devote to drawing comb, and more they get to keep for overwintering. So I have a queen that's laying phenomenally with plenty of comb to lay in, but they have made a few supersedure cells with queen larvae being raised. I went ahead and created a split with existing queen. All right, that's by Lindsay Homestead Farm. I was scratching my head over why the colony was superseding a year-old queen doing a great job. You never know. The bees sometimes know stuff that we don't know, and maybe she is. It might not be her laying. It may be her pheromone production. Maybe something she's not producing enough pheromone, and that's enough right there to get her excused. And even if she's laying a killer amount of brood, if she has great pheromones, and I just wonder all the dynamics here. Bob has talked to me about this before, and it's really fascinating. But there's a lot we still don't know. But I have I always see this in the spring. There's always, out of hundreds of colonies, there's always a couple that are superseding. Maybe they didn't get mated well, like enough, and so they're running out. Who knows? There's a lot of variables on why those things could be happening. Just keep me posted on that, Jeremy. How far should I move my splits from the original hive? Well, Zach, you don't have to go too far. If you have a dead out colony, or you have some space that you want to fill a colony in 3 foot, 2 feet from your original colony, you can do that. What you have to watch out for, and the number one cause for error, in my opinion, on splits is beekeepers not realizing how much of the population they make in the split will go back to the original colony, especially if you have a lot of forager bees. The best time to make your splits is to do it between about 10 and 2 during the day if you can. I mean, if you can't do it in that time period, it's fine. You want to do it, if possible, when the most bees are out in the field. That means you get a bunch of young bees in your splits. But even if you do it when we have a lot of foragers in the hive for whatever reason, just realize that all the older bees are flying back to the original colony, and you need to maintain the integrity of any of the resources, especially if you have small hive beetles. W- Splits are great, but they're young and they're more fragile. This means they need to have plenty of bee coverage, and not just enough bee coverage to get the job done. Ideally, they need to have a little more bee coverage than what they have for brood. So if I have 2 frames of brood in there and a frame of food and 2 drawn combs or foundations or whatever it is, then I want to have about 4 frames worth of actual bee coverage left after the forager bees leave. This is a strong split, as far as what I guess you could maybe try to skimp along, but this is important. When you have those extra bees in there, they can be doing foraging for you. They can be, if you get a really cold snap, they can help keep that brood extra warm. The last thing you want is to make a split, and they can't guard all the combs, and small hive beetles can take over, or the brood gets chilled and then they really go backwards. And a small early split that goes backwards is usually a goner. So you want to make sure that your split, even if it's 3 feet from this colony, the forager bees are going to go back to the original, but that's okay. If you can, find your queen. If you have a double deep and you don't want to find the queen, go in the day before, not the day, go in a handful of days before, let's say 5, 4, put an excluder between the 2 chambers of where the queen's been laying. And when you go in to make your split, you will see either eggs in the bottom or eggs in the top. And you'll know whichever one does not have eggs is where you can pull your split from and be good. You also can use an excluder for another way. This is a nice little tool for the reason to use the excluder. It's a nice little tool for this. Let's say you have a strong double deep, or it's getting there. You want to split it, but you don't know how to find the queen, or you don't want to take the time, and you want to make a really good split. Well, take what you want into the split above the colony, and you can put the excluder, shake all the bees off. You got your brood frames, your food frames, shake all the bees off into the bottom, whatever you want to take for your split. Put an excluder on and put it in a box above them. And then come back literally later that evening, and nurse bees will have moved up and got onto those frames. and maybe shake another frame or two of bees in there to ensure you have that bee coverage. Another fine example of when to use a double screen board this is, though. Double screen boards, you literally can just stick it on the colony. And so I have about 100 double screen boards. They're becoming more popular largely because Bob Benny's videos and more people are starting to recommend them on YouTube. But I think if I have an extra piece of equipment, the double screen board would probably be that extra one. I like it way more than a inner cover, that's for sure. And that double screen board is wonderful because you have that double deep underneath, double screen board, make your split and put it up top on top of that double screen board in that box. And now all that heat from the colony below is going right up there and warming up that little split, helping them take off. And not only will it help them stay warm, it'll help them grow faster than they ever could have maintaining their own little cavity by themselves. So double screen boards can help your splits gain some momentum. And so I answered your question a little bit more into detail than you asked for, but when I make splits, heck, a lot of times I will take it from this colony and stick it within inches of the other because I have two-way pallets and they literally are just a couple inches from each other, and I'll make a split just like that. Works just fine. You just have to realize that all the forager bees are going back to the original location. Okay. Does Corbin have a big enough facility for a conference? Corbin, Kentucky? Corbin, Kentucky? Or is that Corbin, Alabama? There's a lot of Corbins. Well, thanks, Vanderpool Farms. Actually, one of the I've mentioned this before. You posted on B Source several years ago about introducing queens, and I actually remember reading that and thinking, I remember what makes it stick in my mind is that you used the term no cockamamre monkey motions or whatever it is, and that always stuck into my head with that B source post, and it was a really good tips on queen rearing. Honestly, I ought to copy that off of there and post it to my Facebook. I think a lot of people would get a lot from introducing queens with that technique. If I remember to do that, I will. Well, James, and for those of you who are curious, I may not, as far as put my conference in Indianapolis, but I do periodically go and speak places. So anybody that's wanting me to do that, let their clubs or whatever know. I am almost about a year booked out on speaking. I do have a few openings here and there, but honestly, I'm about as booked full this year as I want to be. Not doing anything much more in the spring. I honestly booked too much April and May, and that wasn't much, but it's just it's a bad time of the year to speak. It's just so busy, and I really don't like doing stuff around the holidays. Plus, we'll be working on our own conference, but yeah, I definitely do speaking engagements, and basically any topic that I do know I can do. And the nice thing about the YouTube is for your event is I usually can bring a handful of people with me because people can learn about it through the YouTube channel. Tad small for a queen. Yeah, that might be it. Um, Lindsay, I don't know. Just let me know how that works out for you. Maybe you'll end up with a killer queen, though. What do you think about walkaway splits? Okay. So thanks for the donation again, Elamite. And this was actually a topic that I put together a while back for a bee club that wanted me to talk about all things about splits. So, people talk about splits all the time. So I wanted to get into more details and timing. So, walkaway splits typically, by the time you make the walkaway split to the time that new queen has come back, she lays eggs, and then her offspring are emerging from the cell is like 50 days. That's almost 2 months. And it could be a few more days longer than that, depending on inclement weather and things like that. So that's a long time. And especially if you're making small walkaway splits, but even if you're making big ones, let's say you're taking a double deep and bam, half and half, maybe even the resources out, walk away split, done. 50 days until that colony is going to have brood from that new queen and have that emerging. So that population is going this way for a long time. This can be a big deal, especially in areas with very short seasons up north, because you have a very limited time, not only for the bees to produce honey possibly for you, but then on top of that, produce honey for themselves to go through the winter. And it's not just about honey either. It's also about having the population, the cluster size to be able to keep the brood space warm and raise winter bees, have a nice big cluster, and also have enough of a foraging population to bring in pollen during that fall flow and nectar to build up that winter bee population and overwinter on that honey. So walkaway splits are not all bad, but I think sometimes they're advertised as being better than they are. It will really reduce the size of your colony. So it takes a long time. Now, queen cells are quite a bit faster than that. And obviously, a mated queen is even quicker than that. When I raise my own queens, like I do, and make a split with those, I'll pull them out of a mating nuke, and many times they're in a colony that day or the next day. Those queens are hot, especially if you can get those. I like to make the splits first and then yank them if I can. Doesn't always work that way, but heck, I've seen sometimes where um, those queens will have brood just that fast because they come out of that thing and there's such a hot, well smelling pheromone queen that they come out of there and just lay, and the bees just love them to death. So as far as walkaway splits go, they can be done. You're going to end up with a higher percentage most of the time of loss compared to a good split made with a good queen or even some good ripe queen cells. The other issue I talk about with walkaway splits is when you create a split like that, it's an emergency queen and they will raise queens from eggs. I've seen it so many times. They'll raise queens from eggs, they'll raise queens from larvae that are way older than what they should be. And which ones do you think are going to emerge out of the cell first? It's going to be those old larvae. And I've seen it before in the past where I have made some to just try myself. And you'd have these big cells from the eggs, but then from you'd have some really dinky cells from those old larvae that they just freak out and draw because they're just like, wow, we need a queen. And that's where you like Jeremy was talking about, well, the queen's a little small. That's where you'll end up with small queens because after a certain age, all female larvae are fed for a very short period royal jelly. I cannot remember the exact timing, but after just a short period, then they're fed worker jelly, which will determine whether they become fully fertile or infertile. So obviously, if they're not fed royal jelly, they will be infertile females. We don't want our queens getting any of that junk. We want them getting the best. So what I would say to you is, if I'm going to do walkaway splits, don't do the blind walkaway splits. I would go in there, make a split, um, and divide. Make sure that both sides have pretty even amounts of resources, and then on every walkaway split, come in there a few days later. I would come in 3 days later, carefully open it up, and I would mark which frames had eggs. And anything that's not any queen cell that's not coming from that egg location that we determined gets crushed. That will ensure me that I'm only getting queens from the youngest. And so, yeah, that kind of defeats the purpose of a whole walk away split, kind of, doesn't it? Because you're actually consciously doing something that I think is pretty smart. But that's just my personal opinion on it. This is something that some people hate me for because I have an opinion. And that doesn't mean my opinion's right. I mean, it's just that's my opinion on it. I've tried them before. I don't like walkaway splits personally. I will do anything to avoid that. I'll buy queens first. They are expensive though. Whew, they're expensive. Raising your queens is where it's at if you have the time and the inclination. I love raising queens. So, Jonathan Flint, thank you so much for the donation. Have you ever tried to just pull the frame with a swarm cell on it and make a small split with that? Absolutely. I've done that many, many times over the years. And swarm queens nutritionally are ideal. They get all the goodies. I mean, and that's when we make our queen rearing colonies, our starters and finishers, we mimic swarming as much as possible without sending a swarm off. And colonies that are this close to swarming or even in swarming mode make the best cells. So, as beekeepers, we got to remember in order to do the best by our bees, we got to mimic it as close as possible. We'll never be able to make the best cells unless we mimic when the bees make the best cells. So, as far as have I ever tried to pull the frame with a swarm cell on it and make a small split with that? I have. But there's a couple different ways, and Gus Mitchell has talked about this, and Bob has talked about this, and I will talk about it now. Is there are colonies that make swarm cells for no good reason. I was in one yesterday. I was in colonies yesterday, and some of them literally had double deeps and a medium super on top with an excluder because they need a little bit of space for a little bit of nectar, just in case we get a strong nectar flow. I want to make sure that stays out of the brood nest. But we have colonies that big that aren't swarming. But then we have colonies that are this one that had swarm cells in it. They weren't capped yet. It couldn't have it had a double deep box. It had about 3 frames occupying the bottom with some brood and about 5 frames up top with brood and food and all kinds of room to expand, and they were making swarm cells. I ideally don't wanna use those swarm cells. To me, that's a colony that has a strong swarming tendency, and I don't want to breed for that. I don't want that in my genes. So that one is a complete disqualifier. But there's sometimes like, okay, this is a colony I should have been managing and should have done something to a week or two ago. And so as a consequence, yes, they're swarming, but that's because they're plugged out with nectar or they ran out of room. And you maybe if you would have given them more room, they wouldn't have swarmed. Those kind of swarm cells will make good queens. And as and it's different when you're running an operation or business versus a hobby. You got to choose options differently. But yeah, you can totally pull frames. The only thing you got to watch out for is a lot of those swarm cells are on the bottom, and some of the nuke boxes you buy from companies do not give you a lot of space at the bottom. So you need to test that beforehand before you drop that frame in there, and that queen cell hanging 3/4 to an inch off the bottom gets smashed by the bottom. So all of our queen rearing nukes that we made are extra deep to accommodate that if we wish. Okay. Black cell virus caused a lot of walkway splits to fail early in the season. Seems to work better later in the season. Swarm cells work a lot better. Yeah. So in Hooterville, you're up there in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, right? So for you guys, later in the season is probably what's our almost our dearth period here. I'm walkaway splits is still a little early here. You could do it if you made it strong enough. That you could do it here. April and May is good queen rearing months for us. June is good too. A little bit of July is okay, but the more we get past July, the harder it is for it's doable, and I've done it, but it's just acceptance is not as good in those robbing dearth periods of the year where it's hot and there's just not as much resources to go around. Now, one thing I haven't got around to and wanted to mention is that one of the guys that came to our conference, he just started a company up. He's built extractors in the past, but um, he is now building USA made extractors out of Wisconsin and bottling tanks. I'll have some videos coming up on the 2 wax melter units that I purchased from him. I'll probably be using one for wax melting and one for honey bottling, but they're both made to be dual purposed. Where if you decided one day that we want a bigger honey bottling tank, then it has dual valves on it to where you can use it for a wax melting tank. And he also put a screen in it that's similar to David Davenport's in Hawaii. who designed a screen for his Maxent that didn't have one and works very good. I've got a video on that, and I was really amazed. That was really mind blowing to see how it separated the wax from that slum at the last rendering, and that slum was just able to scoop out. And of course, Ian has that screen, and I'd say thanks to those guys for help on developing this product. But yeah, I got this product 18 gauge still. Be watching out for that wax melter and honey video because I love supporting USA businesses. I mean, we don't have many of them in beekeeping, and we've got to support them. I believe as much as we can, especially when companies like this one are. They listened to me, and I told them, I said, "Hey guys, we need something in the industry that is USA made and also is going to be a dual purpose wax melting or bottling tank." And there are a lot of companies like Man Lake and Dayton who say that their bottling tank can be dual purpose. Well, it kind of can be, but you'll see in my video if you have a wax melting tank that's, let's say, this deep, just for all right, this is the wax melting tank. Now, when you're warming the wax up and the wax separates, wax floats on top of water. And the slum, which comes from propolis or comes from, as the bees go through their metamorphosis, the casings, the pupal casings, and all that kind of stuff, those get into the wax as well over time. And the bees propolize those in. And that's why over time that thin wax gets thicker, thicker, thicker. Anyways, all that stuff sinks to the bottom of the water. So you should have wax layer, water layer, slum gum layer. That's what you call that stuff. Well, Man Lake and Dayton, they talk about how it's dual purpose. They have one valve at the bottom. How are you getting that wax off the top? You're dipping it by hand. This is 2022. We literally have cell phones that you can do this kind of stuff on. Come on, put an extra valve in there. So, Jed, put an extra valve for me in these tanks, and is going to just continue to do that because it's a good idea. I don't know why you wouldn't. And so now with that top valve up here, all that wax on top and a little bit of water, you open that up and you pour it out, and the majority of your wax is separated already. And then you can let the water out through the bottom valve, and there's still a little bit of wax stuck in that slum gum, and that's where the screen comes in handy. And in the video I'll show a little bit more on that, but that's the technology that we need. There's a lot of tools that are out there, whether they're in other countries or they're here but they're not commonly available. We need to support companies that are willing to create products that we need. Might as well. um So thanks, everybody for who came to the conference. He was there with a prototype, and thanks everybody who supports American-made beekeeping. So I have a couple questions here. One's from James McNally. Um, Sports. Oh, okay. He was talking to somebody else. Well, James McNally, actually, I did a video of yours last year on that queen grafting um, table of yours, and I'm going to be using it again this year. I haven't raised queens. This is later. I raise queens by now. I've kind of changed some things up, but I'll definitely be using it. And then this person right here, Ray Watson, do you use a microscope to autopsy dead bees? What would you look for first? Well, Ray, I actually just got a microscope. I say I got one, my wife got one. She may let me use it, but we'll be using it to determine Nozema levels. Also, look at their guts for other type of maladies or things like that. I'm not a super experienced guy with bees and microscopes, actually, not at all. So I will be doing my own homework and learning a lot as well. So there's a lot of things I am excited about learning this year. Oh, Yasmin, so 3 days, isn't it? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm gonna assume it's the conference. Let's see. If you're talking about the conference, actually probably is going to be extended this year. This is something that we've been looking into heavily, and we just made the decision and finalized it. We actually will have the conference Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Now, it will not be all day Thursday. but we plan to make it inclusive into the price. So I wouldn't expect to see a large price increase. There will be no increase based off of the Thursday. We're already paying for part of that day anyways, to set up vendors and stuff like that, and do all those things. So it was just a little bit more to be able to just, we won't have all the entire conference available on Thursday. We're just going to have the vendor room open. So any vendors who are wanting to come to the conference, Thursday will be an extra day that evening. It's not going to be any talking, just a meet and greet. If you want to meet Bob and get an autograph from Bob, or get a picture with him, or Paul Kelly with the University of Guelph, or whatever reason. I don't know why. Maybe a picture with Ian Stepler to put in your garden to keep the crows away. Whatever you need, you can get that done Thursday, and also you'll get to talk to the vendors, get your products early, get your deals early, and of course, then we'll still have it all day Friday and Saturday. But Thursday was really based off of a lot of the we got we polled a lot of people and they responded what they'd like. And one of the things people wanted was to be able to have more time to network and spend time with the vendors, and just wanted time to get pictures with some of their heroes, like Bob. So that's something we are going to have this year as a Thursday night. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll just be networking, fun, fun, fun. Kind of like the Beach Boys. Fun, fun, fun. Go ahead. Okay. Okay. All right. Laurel's giving me suggestions back here on things I need to do better. I'm pretty sure the times 400. I think our microscope is stronger than that. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll when we do the video on the microscope, I'll have all the technical details. That's really more of Laurel's area of expertise, and if it's not, it should be. Just because she's more of an engineer mind than I am. See, if you don't give me that look until you let me finish my sentence, and so you know if it's a compliment or not. It's not a backhanded compliment. You just have to wait. I had to take a breath. I talk a lot. I have to come up from air every now and then. Man, always in trouble. I'm never in trouble. Man, I'd hate to see it if I was in real trouble then. I think I may be in real trouble now. Goodness. Well, thanks, James McNally. It's always appreciated. And hey, man, you ought to send. Maybe if you can't come down yourself to the conference, send one down to. We could display it or something like that. I don't know. It's neat. It's really well made too. I think I told you this. I wax dipped it because I already wax dip a bunch of stuff anyways, and so uh, might as well. And that thing will probably outlive me, I would say, at this point. I just got a Maxent 16-gallon bottling tank and trying to get Maxent to call me back because of the new box was missing parts. Oh man, that is a bummer. Maxent does make some pretty good tanks. Unfortunately, they're really struggling right now to get orders out, and they've almost lost every one of their vendors. They used to have a bunch of them, and they can't supply extractors and equipment. Maxent made some really good, strong bottling tanks, and all their equipment's tough. Gus has got several Maxent things, and they're built really well, but um, I don't know why they're having the issues they're having. It may be because of Massachusetts and shortages on employees and steel, and having a hard time keeping welders in. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely something that we don't ever need to run out of, is well-made U.S. equipment and customer service. Hmm. Yeah, Dry Cut Homestead. Yeah, Jed is a hockey player, so it's even more reason to buy his extractor. I tease him about that all the time. I've never played hockey, but I do like to ice skate, and I tease him a lot because he's one of those tall guys. He's not real skinny, but he's skinnier than I am And I tell him that he guys like me, we're short, stocky guys. That's the real hockey player right there, and He's like, "Give me a break," and he says it in that northern accent, "Wisconsin." I can't do it. Hmm? Oh, Laurel just wanted to make a note that she accidentally timed somebody out that she didn't mean to. It was a slip of the button. I think that was the Boom Chicka Wawa. So, sorry about that. Sometimes it happens. It always drives me nuts. Sometimes you'll be going through, especially with these computers that are so sensitive now. How if you touch it with these pads with one finger or two fingers, they do different things. And there's been a couple of times where I've thumbs down someone's comment. I know that sends them a message, and I always feel bad. And a lot of times I mean to like it. So those things happen. Sorry. Yeah, I know. I know. You'll be able to comment here in just a second. Um, it should let you here in a second. All right. Yasmin, happy holidays, everybody. Loving to see my bees collecting pollen after a rough winter. Planting blooming trees for bees this spring. 50 yesterday. Whew, somebody's busy. Well, Yasmin, thank you so much again for donating to our live chat and also being part of our community for I don't know how long you've been a part, a couple of years, I'd say. That's what's getting so weird about all this is we started our YouTube channel back in 2019. So 19, 20, yeah, three odd years. It has been it's been wild. I'm really shocked it's been that long too. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose. And we have so many friends. It's actually one of the issues I have right now is I have so many of you that I've got a relationship with. Some of it's just like through here, but some of you guys through conference situations or places that have had me out to speak or just other things that have gone on over the years. I've got so many bee buddies, and I can't get to all the messages. And if I can't get to your message, it's not personal, and never is. Anyone that knows me I love talking bees. It's just sometimes well, almost all the time, I just don't have the time. I'm actually planting some trees myself, Yasmin. I've got 5 trees I'm bench grafting tomorrow. They're apple trees, old heritage varieties. So of course we know bees love apple um, blossoms, and then I've got some black locust seeds that I'm planting. By the way, for those of you who watched my video on sowing canola into my dad's hayfields, it came up really brilliantly, but only in the areas that had bare patches. The areas that had thick swards of grass and clover, it didn't hardly come up at all, which was kind of to be expected. But I focused mainly on the areas that had very thin patches of grass, and it actually filled that area very nicely. But I'm disappointed to say that it has not come out of winter really good. That some of it has, but it does not look super strong and vibrant and healthy. And I think probably 90% of it was lost. And I don't know if that's because the deer were eating all of it, which there was a lot of deer presence this fall and winter. And I have some suspicions that the deer were wearing out my food plot for the deer. But overall, it was not cost effective and I think a good idea. So I wanted to give you guys an update. That's one of the videos I want to get out soon. But that sowing direct seeding canola in winter to overwinter to bloom did not seem to work good for me at all. Now, maybe if it was done differently, it would. But what I think would probably be best is just do this time of the year, till up an area, then plant a thick area of it, and I'm sure that would do phenomenal. We love short hockey players. They make great pucks. Yeah, well, at least I get to play the game in some form or fashion. Hmm. I'm experiencing low stores like you and Bob, but don't want to overfeed. Would you recommend open feeding? Well, the problem with open feeding is the colonies that will get the most from are your strongest ones, and those are the ones most apt to swarm. So let's say you have 10 strong, really nice, strong colonies and 10 medium ish weak colonies. If you put out what's the equivalent of a gallon or 2 gallons a piece for each one of those, it's not going to divide evenly. Those big ones are going to get the lion's share by a good margin, and those are the ones that are more apt to swarm. So if I was going to feed, and it's going to be like a little tedious feeding where we don't want to put on too much, I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to direct feed to the colonies, and also I am going to use thin syrup, not even 1 to 1. Um, if they're really, really low and you're trying to put on some weight, then yeah, you can use thicker stuff. But if you're concerned about swarming, then I would go 3/4 of a pound of sugar to 1 pound of water. Initially, it'll take up the same space, but it'll condense down rapidly and won't bulk up quite as quickly. And then you can come back a week later and see where the colonies are at, and like, yeah, that was good enough, or oh, they still need more feed. We as beekeepers, we need to look at the whole sugar ratio as a tool. 1 to 1 and 2 to 1 really are guidelines for new beekeepers who, it's not that there's anything wrong with 1 to 1 and 2 to 1, but sometimes it's a little bit of a pain. 2 to 1 is very difficult to mix when you're using cane sugar and water, especially if that water is not really hot or it's heavy water, as far as like you have a lot of mineral content in it. If your water doesn't have a lot of mineral content, it'll hold more sugar in it easier. And I've mixing syrups is a lot easier to do than mixing just straight sugar, because it's inverted syrup. It mixes into water much better. I mean, it's already got water content in the syrup as it is, so that's why I love syrup. It's so much easier to mix. But when I was doing nothing but buying like a pallet of sugar at a time, we would use not 2 to 1, but we would use 5 parts of sugar to 3 parts water and get that water boiling hot. And then we would mix it in, not while it was still on something boiling, but as it had been taken off. And some people are like, oh, you're causing HMF. HMF and those issues take a little while to come about. This is a fast heating, but same with 1 to 1. If it doesn't matter if it's springtime. If your bees are really light and you need to put a lot of weight on them quickly, last year I remember an example of this. You can put on thicker syrup. I need to finish my sentences better. I had some colonies I pulled some honey off of, and I thought there was a little bit more of a flow, and there wasn't, and it was done. And those colonies needed feed, and they didn't need it next week. They didn't need it 3 days later. They needed it now, and they didn't need a gallon of 1 to 1. They needed multiple gallons, because a strong double deep will go through a gallon of 1 to 1 in no time, especially if there's no flow, burn through in a couple days. So, and it's just gone. So we were feeding our bees over 1.5 pounds of sugar to 1 pound water in late June, July, because we needed to bulk them up quickly. So look at sugar syrup ratios as a tool that you can literally formulate to the occasion. Yeah, as far as the scholarship that we're gonna have for the conference, that's gonna be actually college age and down. So we don't have anything else in the works right now. Um, but it's just gonna be for yeah, college age students, probably down to like 10 years old or something like that. And then they will need to send in information about what they're doing with bees and what their goals are. And I want a little bit of a report. It's kind of like making kids do schoolwork. This is my way of payback, I suppose. No, but it's good for them. And also, if they want to shoot a little YouTube video, myself, Laurel, and another lady will be reviewing the applicants, and we are going to go for those who we think will benefit the most from our conference. And our goal is to get as many in as possible. But I think right now we have enough to sponsor about 20 kids with full rides, food, tickets, hotel, the whole 9 yards. And probably getting the chance to meet the speakers and get autographs if they want them, and all kinds of fun stuff. We're going to make it fun for the kids. We got to make beekeeping fun for young people. If we want them to stick around, we also got them make sure they realize there's a community that they are involved in, and they're not alone. And beekeeping is cool. When you're young, all the kids your age who are so smart, tell you what is really cool, but when you beekeeping, there's a lot of cool things about it, and especially if you start young, like I did, it's a lot more helpful. I started when I was 14, and by the time I was 24, I had made a lot of mistakes, and so I still had a lot more mistakes to make for sure, but it was a lot easier than if I'd have started now at 32 and started from scratch. And young people have so many fresh ideas and innovative things that they can do. So we definitely want to make that a priority. Huntsville, Alabama. All right. What sugar content is a natural nectar range? Oh, what a nice can of worms. Three boys bees opened up. All right. So I'm not an expert, like crazy expert, but I know enough to give a general idea of this. It varies a lot. So you'll have some nectars that are extremely thin, and you'll have some nectars like clover honey that can have quite a strong sugar content to it. I've heard of ranges up into like the 30% sugar content, which is quite good. And there's some much less than that. There's some that probably go over that. Um, so as far as how different plants, the content, sugar content goes, that varies. I'm sure it varies from location. It varies from year to year with rainfall, soil type, all that stuff. So this is a very complicated subject. However, bees do forage based off of efficiency. So if this is where I think this is really cool. And as a bee nerd, I really geek out over this. If we had an acre field full of a nectar producing crop, but it was yielding nectar at like 10% sugar content. And over here, we have a quarter acre of, let's say, clover, and it's got a 30 something percent sugar content. Which one do you think the bees are going to go for first? And from what I've been told and learned, they'll go for the one with the highest sugar content first because it's more efficient. Obvious, it's like us feeding our bees. When we feed them 2 to 1, that takes up a gallon volume, but it's twice as thick as 1 to 1, taking up a gallon volume. Same thing for a bee. So they're programmed in their mind, let's go for what's efficient for our time frame and our literal fuel that it takes to get us over there. What's going to yield us the best result for our time? So there's a lot of variables there with the sugar content in nectar, and I've always found that super fascinating. Would love to see more research on this. Um, Another thing is, there's this big deal right now with acidifying sugar syrup, and I'm not saying this is all wrong, but some of what people are doing may be a little overboard or unnecessary. I like just feeding sugar and water. Works really darn good. I don't add a lot to it because it's expensive, and I haven't really been able to prove that it does anything except eliminate money that from my bank account. Now, as far as the acidifying of the syrup, a lot of people are doing that. Well, honey is acidic. So if honey's acidic, shouldn't we make our feeds acidic to mimic honey? But we're not, when we feed our bees, we're not mimicking honey, we're mimicking nectar. And nectar also comes in a range of pHs. Some nectars are actually fairly alkaline compared to honey, quite a bit more, several times more alkaline. Some of them 100 times more alkaline than honey, which is very acidic. But still, when they take that alkaline nectar, they will invert it and convert it to an acidic honey. So part of what makes honey acidic is not actually what flower it came from. A large part of it is what the bees do to it. So some people literally put acid like vinegar or stuff in their feed because they're told mimics nature better. But does it? I know some great beekeepers that use citric acid and things to acidify their syrup. So it works for some people. For me, I haven't found it necessary. The best thing I feel like I know I get out of it is when I acidify my syrup, it doesn't ferment near as quickly. So it has a longer shelf life, but I try to make my syrup to be used right as soon as I make it. And then if I have some left over and it's sitting around, then that's where I'll add some vinegar or something to it to let it store for a few more days until I'm ready to feed again. So I got a little bit on a bunny trail there a little bit on that. All right, so Dr. Ramesh Sagil, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Sagili, okay, maybe not right. Oregon State University has a video that demonstrates the bee's preference for higher sugar content. Hey, I'll try to see if I can find that. But Harry, if you actually know where that is and wouldn't care to and would send that to me, um, or point me in the right direction, I would love to get my hands on that. I think other people here would too. Let's see. Elamite, what are the best trees to plant in the South? Ooh, okay, so that's a great question. So one of the trees I see commonly sold around here is tulip poplar, but in my area, I'm looking around and going, there's tulip poplars literally everywhere. So if I want to plant a tree, it's not going to be that. We also have to think of what is going on when this tree blooms. Is it going to overlap a basswood flow or a clover flow? Ideally, if we're going to take the time to nurture a plant and put money, we want to identify plants that are going to extend our flows or give us flows during periods of dearth when we're sure the bees will work them. Because if it blooms during our blackberry blossom flow and our clover flow when that's merging, or black locust, they may just prefer that instead and totally ignore your plants. So, with that in mind, what I'm looking for primarily here in Tennessee is something that extends the flow on one end or the other. Early in the season is kind of hard to do because you run the risk of frost. And so our first contributors as far as nectar go in significant amounts are redbud, wild cherry, which is just now blooming. We also have an invasive autumn olive, which is another invasive that I actually love from Asia. Most things from Asia I'm not a big fan of, um, but this plant is awesome. It produces nectar early and it's very consistent, but it is very invasive and it kind of grows similar to privet, autumn olive. And man, I love those things. In bee yards that have the autumn olive, we can expect half to a full super more out of those yards a year just from the autumn olive. And a good year, definitely a super of autumn olive. So that is actually blooming right now. So we have wild cherry, autumn olive going right now, a couple other odds and ends. So if I planted something that would contribute to that, there's not a lot of early that I can do. So I'm really primarily my focus on late in the season. So to answer your question, what I'm looking for is a Vodia tree or BB tree. They're a pretty tree. They produce good nectar. Um, those are really nice looking trees and extend our flow. There's also basswood trees, which are kind of later on in our flow and yield wonderful nectar, prime honey. I love basswood trees. If you don't have a lot of black locust trees or tulip poplars, then yes, those are good. Tulip poplars are kind of a little bit fragile. All it takes is a good spring rain to beat the tar out of them, and they're no good. And tulip poplar honey is not my favorite, but it's not bad either. It's a little bit darker than I'd like and a little bit stronger than I'd like. And black locust is really nice. It's a very light color, but it actually doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. Um, when all of our honeys mixed together, it's actually just a Mod Podge. But black locust, tulip poplar, BB tree, basswood for sure, linden tree, basically the same thing. It's a type of linden. Mm, Sumac, that's definitely a good one. Sumacs produce good bits of nectar, certain types. Gus Mitchell actually on his YouTube channel. Gus, this is your job, man. You're the bee plant nerd. Um, I like it a lot, but not to your level. Vitex, that's a bush that you can plant. I'm actually trying out a variety of sunflowers this year. I'm just shocked that there's not a company out there that or a book that has more information on things that people can plant for their bees. I mean, we know stuff like sweet clover for sure, but what about pollens? Because that's what I want. During my dearth period, I would rather get pollen and from planting than get nectar from planting. Bees will build up on pollen and stay healthy off of pollen. Sugar syrup and nectar are good, but proteins and fats, man, that's where it's at. I like fat bees. Yeah, Bradford pears. Actually, my daughter is actually quite allergic, and many people are allergic to Bradford pear pollen and don't realize it's very common. They actually knew that before they started selling them. They just sold them anyways. When I'm thinking about honey crops, those are the plants that I think of. There's a lot of plants that will produce pollens. Oaks produce great pollen. Hickories produce great pollens. Of course, maple trees, willows, lots of early pollen plants. But right now we have pollen out the yin yang. What we need is nectar plants and primarily stuff in our dirt. Japanese knotweed is supposed to be really good for out of season. However, that's it's they like kudzu 2.0 is what I've heard. We don't have any on this side of the state that I'm aware of. It is out in eastern Tennessee in scattered amounts. Yeah, we have some of our oaks are blooming now up here. Texas Beekeeper. My red oak has got catkins on it, and but my other oak trees do not have anything yet. There must be other types. Yeah, Vitex, if you're wanting something like bush habitat, they're really good. Also, there's the golden rain tree. Yeah, golden rain tree. It's got these beautiful blossoms, and if you're wanting something that's really cool, it's a Tennessee state tree. It is the yellowwood, and it's a biennial. So, or biennial, or however you want to say that. It only produces blossoms every other year, so it's the bees love it every other year. So that's maybe not your best bet. James says our trees are still under a foot of snow, but hey, they're getting watered really good. I hope you guys, after all the weather you guys have a wonderful honey flow this year. Question: will bees cap a frame of honey that I fill back with the honey I took? If they feel that it's necessary, bees will only cap stuff if they are putting it for long-term storage. So if they're in the mode of still consuming a lot of resources or don't see the need for it, they'll store it, and it still could be honey thickness and not be capped. But if they feel the need to cap and a lot of surplus is coming in, then yes, they'll cap that. Yeah, button bush is a good one, guys. That's one I was forgetting. Button bush is a native that does good. Red maple gives good pollen for sure. Yeah, basically anything non-native. Well, and you find that interesting that a lot of the non-native plants actually produce a ton of nectar for our bees and honey, but we got to realize that honeybees aren't native here either and came from parts of Asia and the Middle East and Europe and Africa. So that's where they're from, and that's where a lot of the plants are from as well. And most of the flowers that we have here in the United States, we'll look out here in Tennessee, it'll be summer. We have great rains typically in summer here, and it's green and lush and still a dearth. There's flowers blooming like our Tennessee state flower. It's gorgeous orange lilies, and they don't produce anything for bees. There's several other types of flowers that don't produce much for bees. Now, if you had one hive, there might not be much of a dearth for you. But when you have 30 hives, 40 hives to a yard, there's not near enough to go around. And a lot of these flowers, just they're good. You'll see bumblebees wearing them out, but honeybees, I just don't think have a long enough tongue to be able to access stuff like honeysuckle. The type of honeysuckle we have here, the native stuff, is if they do work them, it's out of desperation. They really can't get a lot out of the native honeysuckle. Very not on a consistent basis. Hi, recommendations for queen rearing gear, urban backyard beekeeper. All right, so I've got some videos on this, and I'll get into your question in 1 second. But if you guys have anything throughout the week that you're wanting to see a video on, a lot of times if you go to my main page, you'll see the playlist. You can click that, and you can look at topics like queen rearing, making splits, and I'll literally have a video on the queen rearing stuff that I use, or the split stuff that I feel like is I like to use. Now, as far as queen rearing goes, it's really basic. Some of the stuff you can make yourself. A lot of it actually you can make yourself. You want to get technical. What you need for queen rearing, as far as supplies, you need a grafting tool, which some people do make them for themselves. I prefer to buy one. The German or the Chinese grafting tool both work really good, and that will be to transfer the larvae. Then you'll need a grafting frame, and that'll need to be a frame that can have bars going across it. And you can purchase all this too, but you can make it out of wood if you're a carpenter. And it needs to have a place where you can put cells in there, which you can purchase again, plastic JZBZ cells. I like the JZBZ system. You can get that at any JZBZ, any bee supply, major bee supply, and it makes the process really easy. And a lot of that stuff's pretty inexpensive, but you can literally make your own queen cells is from wax as well, queen cups to graft into. So you have your frame, your bars, your cells, you have your grafting tool, and done. I mean, that's really all you need if you're doing bare bones. But yeah, in the videos, a lot of times it'll show you, but you can get into queen rearing if you get a grafting tool, grafting bar, cells, grafting frame to hold the bar and the cells or the cups, and just a couple of things like that, then literally you can do it for a handful of bucks, and probably one queen will pay for it if you do it frugally. Of course, you have to make the queen first, but it's really not that expensive to get into queen rearing if you have bees and that little bit of equipment. It's more about making sure that your colony that is raising the queens is strong and populous, not swarming, but the closer you get to overpopulated and swarming like conditions, tons of nutrition, the better queen cells you'll get. Hmm. Let me run up since we've got we get a lot of crowd turnaround. Some people ask me, Cayman, why do you run these chats so long? And some of you are awesome and you stick around the entire time. And there's some people though that can only stick around for 15, 30 minutes. I understand people have lives outside of beekeeping. I don't know what else they would care to be doing, but that's their decision. No, but so there's a lot of turnaround and stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons we run these so long, is so that people on different parts of the world can watch these videos, and get some questions answered live. But I wanted to reiterate, our conference is going to be massive. It's going to have the best deals in the country. January 6th and 7th, 2023. We'll be having double the speakers, like Bob Benny, Paul Kelly, Ian Stepler, Chris Warner, who's a great queen breeder and also a good person. I'll be speaking once this year. The plan is to have Richard Noel speak, who's many of you like on YouTube, Landy Simone, Steve Rapatsky. We're going to have several other speakers as well. And some of them are behind me, some of them aren't. David Peck will also be one of the speakers this year. I'm giving some research. I've got a couple more guys I'm talking with right now. I am looking for a commercial almond guy. I'd prefer someone with a lot of years of experience in the almond or the pollination game, someone who is good with people asking questions, because that's what they do at our conference, and you have to be patient. And some people don't have that level of patience. Um, Not all of us can be Bob, but I need somebody like that so we can have some commercial level information, because there are several guys that come that are either going to the almonds now, wanting to increase or get into that. I also wanted to say, if you know someone who's wanting a Cowan system, or if you're wanting a Cowan system, or not a full system, they're very expensive. But if you're wanting, like in my video where I'm extracting, I've got that Silver Queen uncapper. If you're wanting just that to mount on an uncapping tank or any other items that they may have, they are looking seriously to come to our conference, and they're thinking about it hard. And if someone's wanting something, you can save money. And if I can get a product or two sold, it'll be a shoe in to get Cowan there. You may think, why do I want Cowan there so much? They are just one of the biggest manufacturers of commercial level extraction equipment in the country and maybe the world. So they're quite a awesome company, made in the USA. And I've got their 60 frame line down in my extraction room, and oh man, what an awesome piece of equipment. It makes me feel like I'm turning back the time when people actually cared to make cool stuff. It's kind of like my truck, my 1983 truck, which is almost 50 years, and even an idiot like me that doesn't know much about mechanics can still work on it a decent bit. So, like to have them there. Um, the conference videos are available. I've said it again, they are available for anyone to watch. Anyone who missed the Hive Life conference, or if you came to the conference, there's discounts available for you. You should have received an email, but if you came to our conference, there's $35 off the videos, and it's the complete setup. And they're very well done. I was very proud of the guys that did the work. Very clean and crisp audio and visual. I've considered having Jose at our conference to speak. I really have. And honestly, the only reason I have not decided to have him is um, I'm sure he would do a wonderful job speaking at our conference. However, I'm hoping to get somebody who's a little bit more experienced in the industry and has a lot more connections. So maybe that's a shallow of me, but we're trying to bring somewhat of a commercial audience in. And I'm not talking guys with 1,000, 2,000 colonies. I'm talking guys with, 5, 10, 15,000. It's going to be very difficult to do. And I'm not sure I'll be able to do it, to be quite honest. Um, there's a lot of good commercial guys out there, and I would like them to become a part of what we're doing if they would like to. So that's going to be tricky because they definitely aren't coming probably for the information by and large, and definitely aren't coming for the product deals by and large because most of the times they're getting stuff in bulk. So it's tricky to get those guys, but they're still an important part of this industry, especially as we try to make change towards better bees. We've got to all be on board as far as hygienic bees, maybe varroa resistant bees to a degree, treatments and testing and research and beekeeper research. So the commercials are a huge part of this industry that cannot be overlooked. All right, I'll come and troll people. All right. All right. We never have any trolls, man. We do. We've got to support high quality made stuff. And I've got some tools from my great grandfather who got those way back in the day, and they still are awesome. They still work, and they still have tons and tons of life left in them. And they were made to last back in those days. And I love having a high quality tool to use and something that has resale value. That's one of the main reasons I buy USA made extraction equipment is the darn resale value. You can, if you use it for 10 years and then decide to sell it, 5 years, decide to sell it, you will get a lot more out of it than you will another lesser extractor or bottling tank. That's just the way it is. And most of those units that I've seen made in the USA, they will last your lifetime and maybe your kids. So, we've talked a lot tonight. Oh, Uh, do you think Doug and Stacy and Dr. Leo are idiots? No, I don't think they're idiots. I think I know that they know exactly what they're doing and they're catering to an audience that doesn't really care 100% that they're being fed on the best ways. It's more about YouTube views and about ratings. And hey, I'm on YouTube. You've got to get people to watch your content to a degree or you're going to stink it up and obviously it's not going to work. But at the same time, there are people that get on these platforms and they literally will do a lot of things and say some things that are just not true just to get views. And that's the way I kind of feel about them is it's not that all their stuff is bad. I've watched some of their videos, but I do feel like it's a little over in left field and that there's several people that do that. Lots of the one thing that rubbed me really wrong with the wrong way with Dr. Leo is how he's really anti-American style beehives. And I'm not saying that Langstroth beehives are the best beehive in the world. I'm not. And they're not the most perfect hive in the world, but he uses that as his marketing scheme that Americans are doing it all wrong, and yet we have this massive, massive pollination industry. We have some great beekeepers. Some the best beekeepers I know use these hives and they're keeping their bees alive. He is he is spreading the lie that the equipment we keep our bees in is more important than the bees. That is not true. Healthy bees are what's important. What's inside the hive? You can have a great insulated hive, you can have all these features. It does not matter if the bees are not in good shape inside the hive. And he's entitled to his opinion. Our opinions are very different. He feels like catching bees from the wild and not treating bees and charging $90 a pound for honey. Yes, he charges $90 a pound for his honey. That's because he doesn't have much of it to sell, I would bet you. Um, and if I could get half of that for for mine, I'd sell him every drop. He can make double off of my honey. I would love that. Um, but how many of us live in areas where we can catch enough swarms to replace our losses every year? How many of us sell books and do lectures and make enough money doing those things that if our bees stink it up because a lot of them died, that we can just catch swarms and recover and we're not living off of our bees. I know a lot of you guys aren't planning to make a living off of bees, but you definitely would like to keep your bees alive from year to year and not shell out hundreds of dollars. Some people live in areas that you can catch swarms in like mad. Some of the reasons guys like Randy McCaffrey, and Randy will tell you this. Those guys down there in Mississippi, they live in some of the best swarming areas in the world. Bees they have good habitat. There's a lot of food for them down there. It's warm. The winters aren't rough. There's commercial beekeepers that go down in there, which bring even more bees down there, and commercial beekeepers do send swarms off. And so it's a good bee area. It's easy to catch swarms in those locations. There are people that could do the same exact thing, same type of swarm traps, or try to do cutouts, and there's just no cutouts to be done. There's no traps to catch. Not all areas are created equal. And so that's where really whine about some of these methods that are promoted online is we need to focus on bee husbandry. That needs to always be the focus as beekeepers doing right by our bees and realizing that we need to get in the hives and monitor feed levels, whether that's natural feed or artificial feed. We need to monitor mites, monitor all these things. And I feel like the message that guys like Dr. Leona, and there's many, many more, is lazy beekeeping. And that breeds lazy beekeepers who share that on Facebook and it just perpetuates throughout everything. And we end up with the situation that we're in, which I believe is largely due to the lazy beekeeping movement that has been extremely popular over the last couple decades. But opinions are like noses, everybody has one. And my nose is fairly big. So, um, all jokes aside, that is my opinion. And there are obviously a lot of people who disagree. So please don't get upset just because I disagree with you on that. Yeah, huge losses in Canada. Our heart really bleeds for guys up there. There's a lot of guys like Ian and others that I know who are good beekeepers and they're still getting to the bottom of what all the losses are over, but it's bad up there. And that is another thing as a beekeeper. If you're an ag, you got to realize if you're in bees, you're in agriculture, you're in the weather. The same way it is with the cattle industry, chickens, things happen when you're fooling with nature. And that's why like the chicken industry by and large has gone to having them in buildings and stuff. You try to take the element out of it as much as possible, the bad side of nature. So as beekeepers, we got to realize that there are going to be some years, even as good of a beekeeper as you could be, it's just not going to be as good of a year. It's not going to be your year. And I'm afraid that might be that way for Ian this year. And poor guy had a rough year last year with the drought and lack of moisture in the ground. And not as great of a honey year as he'd like to have. So guys like Ian, whether you agree with their style of beekeeping practices, you still got to tip their hat at them. Those guys are busting their butt and doing the best they can. Lots of respect. So, anyways, I would like to say to everybody, thank you so much for coming on. You guys are awesome, and I'm looking forward to getting to see you guys in the future. And the spring is here for a lot of us. Some of us, spring means more snow. Sorry, Canada, but th- this community that we have going on, it is impacting so much. I am on the phone 15 to 20 hours a week talking to big companies now, not just over the conference, but also ways that some of these companies are asking me, hey, we're looking into creating maybe some products that are better for small professionals, sideliners, and hobby beekeepers. What are the people that you talk to telling you? And they're listening to us. They want to be able to network with you guys and bring product. And there's a lot of changes going on. And it's because we're staying informed and we're working together as a whole in a community. So a lot of good things in the pipeline, a lot of things with the conference coming on. The goal is to announce everything by June 1st. The experimental yard is underway. I've got a guy helping me now and some other guys. So the information issues and just my lack of time to get everything done in a timely manner, that should dry up with the help that I will receive and should be able to get that information and streamline it out better on a more consistent basis. But we have EPA approval to do oxalic acid towels, and Randy Oliver is helping us with some of the guidelines on that. So we're trying to do a lot of things. As much as we can to help out. But also, I'm going to be shrinking my operation down to about 150 colonies. 50 of those colonies will be going to experiments and research, and we will run about 100, maybe 125, if Laura will let me, maybe 150 for honey production. And I know we will no longer at this point be selling queens. We're just going to have to eliminate some things. Queens is what we've decided to eliminate. We will be doing fewer nukes. I would not expect to see more than maybe 200 nukes at the most sold by us in a year now. And but these other things have taken up our time, and we feel like it's worth it. And we appreciate your patience with a lot of these things and your support. And we realize fully that without you guys, none of this would be possible. And we look forward to seeing you guys. It's my favorite part about the conference is getting to actually meet you guys for the first time. So, thank you guys very much. God bless you on this weekend, hopefully with family or church family, and take care. We'll see you next time.